Welcome everyone to the American Civil War Museum and our Homefront Education Series. My name is Joseph and I am joined again by Stephanie Arduini as we walk through the war. Now, today we have moved into 1862. So we're talking a little bit more about the second stages of the war, right? So as we're moving into 1862, we've had already the large battle at Manassas or Bull Run, and now people are starting to reevaluate and rethink what's going to happen with the war. I know Abraham Lincoln has got a lot on his mind, and he's now starting to appoint one person in particular in order to take charge and try to lead a campaign to end the war.
Right. So after the first battle, which they thought was going to be one battle to solve it all, to allude to Lord of the Rings, it continues, how everybody's having to readjust their strategy. And in April 1862, you get the Battle of Shiloh out in Tennessee, which at that point is the single bloodiest day of the war, and it shocks the nation, North and South, just how many people died and what this war was going to be like. And as 1862 continues, Abraham Lincoln has a man named General McClellan who's in charge of the U.S. Army here on this peninsula of Virginia between the James and York Rivers. And the strategy is capture Richmond, capture the capital of the Confederacy. If you can capture that, cool, we can end the war. You captured their seat of power. So you have George McClellan, who is trying to get to Richmond, and then Robert E. Lee and Johnston, so the Confederate officers on the Confederate Army, opposing them. And Abraham Lincoln gets frustrated because he feels like George McClellan is being a little bit cautious and not moving as aggressively as he could. And in some of these clashes in and around Richmond in 1862, Johnston is wounded, taken out of the picture, and Robert E. Lee assumes command of the Confederate Army there. And with an unlikely victory, he kind of takes on this iconic stature and becomes an icon of the Confederacy, a hero. And that heroic stature of Robert E. Lee just continues to grow throughout the war and make him and his Army of Northern Virginia almost the symbolic army, or that essence of the Confederacy.
Right. And so as, of course, McClellan is beaten back over the course of the 7 days battle, in which Lee does rise to that level of prominence that you're talking about, then the morale, I'm sure, in the United States is not just so great.
Incredibly frustrated. And, as a person who manages people, I can empathize with Abraham Lincoln. How do you figure out how to get George McClellan to do what you want him to do? He's a military guy. Abraham Lincoln is not a military guy, but he wants him to be bolder. And in the back of his mind, Abraham is already thinking about strategies of emancipation that could help to undermine the institution of slavery for the Confederacy.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. So as Lincoln is trying to find some solution to what's going on, what else is happening? What is needed for him to make that next step?
Well, the war continues, and by the fall of 1862, at the Battle of Antietam in Maryland, it's interesting because that battle doesn't really have a clear winner, but it's in Maryland, so technically a state that was still in the United States, and it wasn't a loss, so Abraham Lincoln is seizing on this opportunity to make some bold changes and statements. So number one, he fires George McClellan. He's been frustrated with him as a commanding officer, and he's out. But number two, he uses this as an opportunity to issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, kind of a shot across the bow of the Confederacy that says, guys, if you don't surrender, on January 1st, 1863, this order goes into effect, which will essentially free all enslaved people in places openly in rebellion. So get in line, or this is going to happen. Confederates, who were still in control of their place, and most of their territory, just didn't really care that much. It was kind of a come and enforce it, let me see you try.
Right. Wow. But that's an incredible step to go to, because we've already talked about how the war didn't really start, at least on the part of the United States, as anything to do with slavery, but really to preserve the Union. So that change on Lincoln's part definitely requires something to push him, something to motivate him to that point, right?
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully we're going to be able to get into that too as we move into the last part of our 1862 section, that is truly the struggle for